I'm Adrienne Enns, and I welcome you to the Intention Sessions podcast. I want to inspire our most intentional living. In each episode, we'll talk to remarkable individuals who will share their authentic journeys and their insights with us. They're going to remind us that life's complexities can be our greatest teachers, and that intentional living can be expressed in an infinite number of ways. I hope you find some inspiration for your most intentional life right here. Today we have with us the very lovely Madeleine Marentette. Madeleine is the founder and CEO of Grail Springs Retreat Center for Wellbeing. This is Canada's leading holistic wellness destination. Madeleine is a best-selling author, educator, soul coach, and healer. She continues to illuminate the path for individuals seeking personal transformation and life fulfillment. For over 25 years, Madeleine has dedicated herself to the study and processes of the human soul energy connection. This awareness she feels is relevant more than ever in today's changing and challenging world. A dedicated life of service to people, the planet, and our sacred animal kingdom has her working relentlessly, taking action, co-creating with others, and hosting wellness retreat programs at Grail Springs. Madeleine holds a series of lectures and retreats throughout the year, both at Grail Springs and around the world. She is presently working on her next book on the human condition as it relates to the sacred and the evolutionary track of soul consciousness and destiny. Madeleine has had a significant effect on my life personally. I would describe her as a friend, a colleague, and a mentor. I have the very rich pleasure of visiting Grail Springs often. And it has been elemental in my personal journey and my professional journey. I often facilitate there. It is a true gift. So today, Madeleine is going to talk to us a little bit about manifestation and using the seasons as tools. And we were having an interesting conversation yesterday. We're recording this in the spring of 2020. And Madeleine, I wasn't really expecting to share this story, but as a place to start, I remember looking at the Grail Springs website when I was in a very troubled place. Somebody had put me onto it and I was like, I need to go somewhere. I need some help. And it's just so funny to me because at the time, it might as well have been like reading Greek. I was just like, I don't understand. And I think part of me was really afraid to even open up and take care of myself. So I mention it because this is like a giant reset. So, for somebody who doesn't know anything or has heard the word manifestation, but is like, what does that mean? And how can I start? What would you say to them? And with that, I also welcome you.
Wow, that was quite the introduction. And thank you so much, Adrienne. I have the same feelings for you. There's a lot of women out there and men, but our community is mostly women who have been very actively involved for several decades, trying to raise awareness, consciousness, wellness for, all human beings. And that's how you and I met. Grail Springs was built on the premise of, making the world a better place as much as we had the power to do so, helping people, animals, and the planet. And then you and I got introduced, and only to discover I think you came as a client first, I guess.
I did.
Yes. And then we met, we talked, and we realized, that you needed to be teaching here. And so our relationship developed from there. And so it's also an honor. I've loved to watch you develop your books and your cards, which we use here at Grail Springs. And so I thank you as well. And thank you for this invitation. So your question, what is manifesting?
Mm-hmm.
So when you come from a place of feeling disempowered and you move into a place of regaining your power back, in my mind, you're on the first step towards becoming the super manifester that you're meant to be. And so creation, I always go back to purpose. What's my purpose? It's so elementary to me. It's really, for me, is about creation. What can I do to create for myself, my life, my home, my family, my business? Every breath I take when I get up in the morning, it's always about, hey, what am I going to create today? And that to me has everything to do with how much you love life. So life, love are the recipe for the manifestation process, which we're going to talk about today.
Beautiful, because that story that I shared, I feel more connected to it now because I see manifestation and living intentionally very much in alignment and in many ways one and the same. And I almost feel, yes, this connection with the Grail, started manifesting years ago, and at that time, it's like just this something had cracked open and I wasn't even totally connected to it yet. So would you say too, like it's even just this openness and willing to go there?
Absolutely. And the visual, the cracking open, is a visual that I've come to know in myself as as being a happening, an actual happening several times in my life, but they were significant happenings where you felt that cracking open. And when that happens, when the heart cracks open, the mind releases you know, um, old thoughts and wanting to hang on to an old opinion or idea or the way things should be, and all of a sudden it's like your mind goes blank and is open to receiving something new, something that you've never heard of before, but the downloading of it gets you so excited, and your body becomes, your body begins to vibrate. And it wasn't until someone said to me, "Oh, that's a sign that you're on the right path, that something new is happening." It's that excitement within yourself that becomes your barometer to step forward, believe in yourself, believe in what you've just realized, and begin to own it, embrace it, embody it, and don't let go, and keep going forward and let it unfold its messages to you, unfold its teachings to you. And so these moments of cracking open, I I look forward to them, and I feel now like I don't have enough of them. I want more right now. Because we're all in this, we should mention we're in the middle of the coronavirus. We're in the
Yes.
middle of 2020. It's a significant time. It's highly unusual and probably will never happen again in any of our lifetimes. So we're experiencing something for the first time that the whole world is experiencing. And so that cracking open, I feel there's going to be massive revelations after, the closing of this chapter. So we're in the middle of it right now. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of anxiousness. It's very difficult for people to envision the future. We never know what the future is going to hold, but I do feel there is going to be a lot of people who are going to begin to expand in the heart. And as a result, then the mind will be more open for new ideas, creativity, innovation. And I look forward to that, myself included.
I totally agree. And I find it interesting because a lot of times on our personal journeys, we're going through, difficult or um, heart wrenching transformation at different times. And you know what I mean? So I can talk, for example, about my struggles and but I didn't talk about it when it was actually happening because I didn't have the capacity to. So it's just interesting now in this time that we're all in this mess and this pause together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's going to bring about some wonderful things, but we want to bring it back today, right? To, okay, how can I begin to continue to be positive in my life as we're being isolated, as we're dealing with these difficulties, whether they're financial, your budgeting and your job. Is your job at stake? Are you going to be able to go back to your job? There's a lot of course, uncertainty right now. But at the same time, I think my message for others today is to not stop dreaming. Yes, my plans are on hold too. Normally, March and April, as you know, you're familiar with my system. It's a time for launching your plans and your ideas, planting those seeds. And we'll talk a little bit more about how, I came up with this system. But once honestly, I had to grieve. I went through this grieving process for the first 2 weeks of the shutdown for a lot of reasons, for everybody around me and for myself, but also for my own dreams. Essentially, we're putting a year on hold, right? And we may be able to continue on with some things, but I honestly, you and I talked about this, like I really couldn't function in my normal way for the first 2 weeks. I was just stunned. I expect the world to go through its changes, but I didn't expect what happened, and I don't think many of us did expect it to manifest the way it did as a pandemic. So the reason I really was so happy to be able to talk to you on this podcast is to, have people realize it's not a time to stop dreaming. Yes, we can be isolated, but this is also a beautiful time to, think of it as an incubation period where we can, and literally we're being incubated.
We are.
We are. Because we don't have a lot of contact with the outside world. So this is an opportune time to go within. Now, there is resistance to that.
Yes.
And I understand a lot of people don't want to go within. To them, it can be a scary place. And as you said, when you're in a place of illness or challenge, calming the mind and the heart and the physical body it's the top of my list. We have to calm down before we can think our way out of a situation or in, right? So staying calm. We talked about this yesterday. I was hosting you on
Yes.
On our retreat at home series, which was wonderful. It was lively. It was joyful. And I thank you again for.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
It was really quite beautiful. But we talked about the importance of get back to your baseline, no matter what's going on around you, to make sure you're back. You make sure you find your way back through whatever tools you have that you're used to, or create some new ones. So many people are offering some wonderful tools, but you have to get back to that baseline before you start to make decisions.
And what are some simple ways that you would suggest? We did have this conversation yesterday, but for somebody who maybe doesn't have any tools, or somebody who's just so, there's so much frantic energy. What are some simple things people can do right in this moment to get grounded, feel a little calmer, and just keep coming back to a simple practice?
Okay, well, the first thing you have to be aware of your own inner vibration. Are you freaked out? Are you high level? Are you experiencing anxiousness? Are you going into depression, going the other way? Where is your energy level? What's the baseline? And recognizing in a single moment, wow, I shouldn't have watched that news report. Now I'm back into worry and fear. Okay, so acknowledging first that you have this inner awareness, and the inner awareness is telling you you're not at your baseline. So the first thing that I do is I recognize that, and I say a single word to myself. My mantra is calm, CALM. And it's been that way for 20 years. I've told people I've never changed it because for me, our lives are so challenging that staying calm always brings me back to the baseline. I take a deep breath. That's the second tool that I use. Big deep breath. So taking a deep breath also not only helps to relax the fight or flight, syndrome that we can move into, the sympathetic system. You want to calm that down. And so being in touch with how you're actually vibrating in your body, and I think we went through a couple of those examples. Yoga will teach you that. So, being in your body, feeling where the anxiety is located. So oftentimes people feel it in their solar plex. So taking a deep breath, we know physically, biologically, that helps to relax the nervous system. That's the quickest, fastest way. So a few deep breaths and a mantra can be helpful. You mentioned music yesterday. I absolutely agree. Turn on some kind of a healing meditation. There are thousands of healing meditation musicians out there now. You can download on Apple. There's some beautiful, beautiful things that can help you come to that place of calm. So find your tool, find the thing that can help you. It could be an imagery. And I mentioned yesterday, some people carry the photo of the Dalai Lama, or Jesus Christ, or Mother Mary, finding an image that helps you to emulate their countenance, their gift to you to help you calm down and get into that place of calm. And from there, once you're back in your baseline and in that space of neutrality, now that's where I start to do the work to find solutions. And that's another big key. We talked about many times about anxiety. It's a feeling of loss of control, a feeling of loss of choices, right? There was someone on the call yesterday talking about the lack of choices. It freaks people out. And right now we're in a place where we don't really have a lot of choices, seemingly, because we're all on lockdown. And that alone, that action, that directive on a worldwide scale has caused people to feel they're out of control. They have no control of their life or their future. And it's understandable. But there is choices. And the choices are, okay, what can I do while I'm here in lockdown and make this productive, make it joyful, have a creative experience while I'm at home? Yes, I have to pick up the phone and make some hard phone calls to financial institutions, whatever you have to do. Get it done, get it off your plate, and then make sure you're doing things for self-care, for inspiring yourself and your family, if you happen to be with family members, creating moments of joy and creating new memories. This is going to be talked about for centuries. And so are we going, we don't want to keep focusing on all the bad news. Let's talk about what are families doing. They're getting closer, right, Adrienne? They're getting closer. They're getting to know their kids maybe for the first time, or their teachers.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of beautiful things happening out there that I can't imagine. My music list is going to be filled with all of these new songs that artists are sitting at home right now being inspired about, humanity being one. And I can't wait to hear what's being created out of all of this. So there are choices. And if we can remember to be mindful of our anxiety, find your tool to calm down, and then begin to take a step forward towards joy and creativity.
I totally agree. And I just want to add to that. I think of the point about awareness and creation are so important because I used to have horrible anxiety. And when it came up, I was terrified of it, which would only make it worse.
Right.
And then I would want to numb it out. So it was this very difficult cycle. So I think the awareness piece is also noticing these uncomfortable feelings, because I still feel the feeling come up now, and it could be fear, it could be excitement, but it's being on my own side and embracing it and being like, this is part of my whole experience. Like, oh, what am I going to do with this? And I want to do something better, So that's where the self-care comes in. And it's a practice.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious for you. You often host this workshop, and it can be a weekend long and it's beautiful. But I love the work that you've done around manifesting through the seasons. We've agreed this is an unusual time, but still want you to walk us through that thinking. So as people open up to dreaming, which I think is just so important, they can start planting these seeds.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I should give a little bit of a background.
Please do.
So, just take a couple of minutes to let everybody know how this came about. It was a conglomeration of events in my life and learning, traveling, working with coaches, working with shamans, um, watching and observing, living on the edge of a forest, so being in nature. I was also a student of art in college, art and art history, and learned quite a bit about the history of man and culture, and in that, of course, art. And so I took all of these things together, but most I have to give a little bit of information that what I've created is really a communion or blend of ancient wisdom and modern day science, pulled this these understandings of principles of nature, because this is the running thread between the two worlds, and create a system that is practical and can be understood easily and used by all men and women for creativity, for organizing your life, for being very efficient. And you don't have to be of any particular religious order. It has nothing to do with this. It is our inner clock that is tied to the inner clock of nature. So realizing that we are one with nature, and nature has its own rhythms. And stop me at any time if you have any questions.
I will, but I'm going to invite you to just
Continue.
go.
Okay.
Yep.
So one of the important things to understand is, this is called solar astrology. It's the science of relationships between all living things within the universe. It's an ancient knowledge that every community, tribe in the world once practiced, but it's virtually disappeared from the mind of the average person now. You have to go deep into the jungles to find, shamans, medicine men, and women who know and understand the science of relationships between all living things. We are now hearing conversations. My son and I watched History Channel last night. It was called Earth, An Amazing Day. And it was so beautifully filmed about the ecological ties we have. We cannot afford to sacrifice even the microbes of the ocean. All of us depend on each other, from the smallest to the biggest. And when we begin to play or ignore one aspect of the life culture, ecology, you're going to sacrifice everyone involved. But this evidence, the evidence of this understanding has been left in stone all over this planet for us to learn from. And it shows us how the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Nordics, the Celtics, and other ancient civilizations worshipped nature, the sun, the stars, and the moon. And so there's some of us who still, this is become part of our path, our dogma, our way of life. And that's a thank you to, the mystics of India, and when the Beatles went over to India and they brought back this understanding of yoga. And that's where, and we have to thank, it was the 60s that brought that awareness to North America, and we began to explore. So these stones told us how they structured their culture, their ceremonies, their architectural achievements and cosmic cycles. So I began to study this in my college days in the study of art and design. And then I got really sick, and through my search to get well, I had this accidental introduction to something called Raja Yoga. So today I'm a Raja Yoga student. I'm also a Raja Yoga practitioner. So I'm always in between, right? Teaching and learning, but finding a way to take these ancient understandings, which are really understanding the laws of nature and how they apply to the human condition.
Is that the premise of Raja Yoga?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably 20 volumes of books.
Yes. No, no, just because for someone listening who doesn't know about yoga at all, there are so many different lineages and bases for practice. So I just wanted to clarify it.
Well, what's interesting about Raja, when I did the research on it, Raja is considered the grand dame. Okay, so it's like the grandmother, and everything else was born from the Raja. Raja Yoga means king's way or crown's way. So it's talking about the mental aspect of self, the science of the mind. And so your physical yogas, like your Ashtanga yoga, Hatha yogas, they are born out of Raja. So Raja was really the mental discipline, the mental exercise. And with that came posture. And so today, what we learn from in yoga classes are the postures. And the postures are supposed to enhance our mental discipline. My study, this is going back to the 80s, there was no such thing as yoga studios on the streets of Toronto yet. It was coming. But my study was the mental discipline, and as a result, I became physically well. So that's the short story on that aspect. So that experience, the art experience, and then the travel, which I've been very fortunate to travel to some really incredible places, sacred places. I've always been interested in cultural travel. And then the study of Raja itself brought me Bancroft here in Ontario, built the Wellness Center because I wanted a place to share. And not to say it wasn't a struggle at first, because no one had any idea what wellness was, just not a typical word we would use back in the days, which doesn't seem too long ago, but there's been a lot of progress.
There has been
in 20 years,
yes.
Right? And a lot of just very recent. So knowing all of this, I'm going to work, I'm building this beautiful sacred space for people to come, but I'm also living on the edge of a forest. So what I didn't realize is, because of where I was living, I was witness to the cycles of nature. So it's not that I was consciously watching and looking every single day to see how it fit in with my studies. But after several years, I think it was 2004, I had the aha moment about seasons and how I was feeling during the seasons, because I've also experienced anxiety, panic attacks. I was in postpartum depression. I know that I definitely had experienced a couple of other bouts of depression, different kinds of depression. But how seasons affected our psyche, our mental, emotional, our physical, and even our spiritual longings. So that part started to come into the picture. And then as I was learning from others, I began to realize there's a way of capturing all of this in a story that could be helpful and useful for myself to begin to manifest health, well-being, happiness, successful business, family relations, just bringing wholesomeness back into my life. And I have to tell you one story, because you do know now I have a calendar, right? Right? So it's the calendar of manifesting.
I have one too now.
Yes. I don't live without it. It's become very intuitive, but I still have my I'm looking at it right now, my April. So it says right now it's the month of the guardians. Be steadfast, reliance, and nurture. Don't forget to dream and vision as they start to take hold. So I'll go back to that in a minute, but I'm surrounded by the system in notes, in calendars, and of course now I'm writing the book. But there was a moment in 2004 where we each have those years where everything kind of implodes, and that was one of the years for me. And I met someone from California. I was starting to speak down in California at the Conscious Life Expo, and someone said, "Oh, you need a life coach." Now, I'd never heard of a life coach. It was very new. It was a new spoke on the wheel of self-development. And then another person said, "Oh, you need a life coach." And I thought, what's a life coach? I got to check this out. So I recommended someone. She was from California. I had to get back home, but we exchanged phone numbers. And next thing you know, a week later, I'm on the phone, and I have about 6 months of calls with this woman. I think every two weeks. So I just want to tell everyone the story because this was the moment that catapulted me into creating the system. She was listening to me. Here I was, a new divorcee. I was taking over a business. I was deeply in debt and scared out of my mind and regretful. What have I done? I should not have taken on so much, and a single mom.
I understand
right?
it all, yes.
Yeah. And you're trying to take care of yourself and stay safe. So very similar experience we're all going through now. It was just, what is my future holding? And I get on this call, and after a couple months, things are moving very quickly. She's helping me take that step towards calm and then finding solutions and making me accountable for making the calls or doing what was next to create the life I really wanted to create. And one day I was talking about having not had a vacation in over 10 years, totally, absorbed in building a business. You know what it's like. So there was a moment where I was talking about my dream to go to Scotland. And she said, "You know what? I've heard you talk about this dream too many times now."
Yep. I love this.
And she says to me, "You want to go to Scotland?" And I said, "Yes, I really want to go to Scotland. If I could go anywhere in the world, that would be where my father's roots are. And I want to take my son. We love castles. We love, the stories of the Loch Ness. And we also wanted to go to England at the same time and see the Stonehenge and all of that and Glastonbury." So, because as people know me, I am a big fan of Grail lore and legends and the Merlin series and King Arthur. I love the whole mythology. So she said, "Okay, get out your calendar. This is a true story." I was okay. And my heart started racing. And at the beginning of this call, you said how you're almost afraid to move forward into success sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? There's an anxiousness if you're going to commit to something. Uh-oh, now I have to.
Yeah, like what you're excited, and then you wonder what did I just do?
Right. There's a fear factor around taking a step forward, because no matter what you do in life, there's always a risk. You want to mitigate those risks. And I'm very good at that now. But when I was in my 20s, not at all. I didn't even consider risk. Didn't know what that was. I would just jump in all feet first. So she has me take out my calendar, and I believe it was at the beginning of the year. And she said, "Okay, when can you go to Scotland? Never mind the money and all of that. When can you go?" And I said, "Well, I guess I would go in the summertime when my son's out of school. The later, the better, because then I could save more money." So she said, "Okay, pick a day. What day do you want to fly?" And I thought she was she was kidding. She had me open up the calendar. We found the second last Saturday, I think, or Sunday, and it was August 16th. I'll never forget it. I'd have to look back at the date. 2007. We flew out August the 16th, and we did a 16-day tour of Scotland and England. And how it happened, she had me vision the journey. What was the point of the journey? In other words, what's the meaning? And I'm mentioning this because it's part of the manifesting system. There has to be meaning for everything that I do. in my life now? What do you want to, in other words, what do you want to learn from this experience? And then we counted the months in a practical way. It was 8 months from January to say to August. How much is this going to cost, and what can you save every month? Can you pay for pay for partial payments on hotels? Can you, and then pay the rest once you get there? We had it all worked out, and before you know it, my son and I were in Scotland on August 16th.
I love it.
Yeah.
I just
And
love everything about this story.
well, it's about intention, right? And she brought it down to brass tacks. What's it gonna cost? Keep in budget. What kind of hotels can you stay in? I mean, she had me down to the details. And it's so interesting. I'm back in touch with her after all these years, hoping to see her, drive down to California to see her next year. We're planning that now. So I have to put that in my calendar. She'll love that.
Yes,
And yeah, and you never know who you're influencing in your life, but I really want her to understand how that small exercise that she took me through changed the course of my life, and I've now changed the course of hundreds of other lives because I teach this now to so many people. So, what's the system?
What's the system? That's what we want to know.
Okay. So based on all of the things I've told you and all these different components, the system I've created is called the 4 Seasons of Super Manifesting for a Brilliant and Beautiful Life. 4 bodies of self. We have the physical, the mental, the emotional, and spiritual, and each one of them need food. They have different needs, right? So some of them are social, relationship feeds our soul. It feeds our emotional, our mental self. Physical, food, nutrition, breath work, yoga, exercise, walking. So each one of them have their requirements. The holistic model, and even Dr. Weil and Dr. Oz, they all talk about the holistic model of well-being. It's now becoming more mainstream, thank goodness. But the existence of these 4 bodies, it's who we are. It's what we're made up of. We have these 4 separate aspects of self that make up the whole. And what I came to understand, and yourself, I'm sure will agree, and anyone who's listening, when one of those are out of balance and not getting their needs met, the other 3 are going to begin to collapse. And you will pay a price. So what I've noticed about, here at Grail Springs as a coach and, checking people in and checking people out and seeing what people are coming in for, I have to say this. Everyone has one area of their life at least that has been neglected to some degree. So some people are really strong in the physical. They've spent all of their life in athletics, eating really well, but emotionally they're not there. They're angry people. I'll never forget this athlete who was a star athlete. He came, his life was a mess. He couldn't understand it, and he was just diagnosed with prostate cancer. But he had taken such good care of his life, his body, all his life, but he realized he was angry person. And so we talked through that revelation and started to make those changes to release the past, release that anger, and eventually he was able to, and not just through our coaching, obviously he was going for treatment and he was doing other things in his own family and personal life. But it just showed me, that was one of the first real experiences I had of a serious situation where it was really hard to understand how someone who was taking such good care of themselves physically had this crisis on their hands. And finally, we started seeing a lot of books and thought leaders coming forward and talking about how the emotional aspects of our well-being can cause physical harm if not taken care of. So one of the best known authors around that is Louise Hay. right? He brought all the ancient Chinese knowledge about the connection between the four bodies to the forefront of modern day modern day life, and published hundreds of books on it, which you can still buy online. She has her own publishing company, but she was hitting a truth, and I was seeing it at the Grail that everyone who was walking in the door had one aspect, at least one aspect of self that was being neglected, thriving in the other two or three, but one of them was breaking down. And so as a result, it was starting to have an effect on other aspects of self. So when you put your mind to getting strong in all four aspects of self, you begin to, it's like the machine starts to work for you. You know what I mean? You don't have to keep greasing it all the time. You don't have to go and do repairs. You start to see the machine is just working. You don't have the emotional upsets. You don't have the mental breakdowns. You don't have any physical ailments. And spiritually, you feel free
Mm.
to feel you belong in the world, and that you have merit here, and that you are being heard by something greater than just yourself, or even other people who may be ignoring you, that you have or can have a relationship with nature and God, or any particular entity, divine, spiritual intelligence, whatever that is. There's a moment that you can come to and recognize no one needs to tell you that you're a divine being. You begin to realize you are, and that you must honor that aspect of yourself through practice, through acknowledgement. And in that, you begin to just become a happier, healthier person. And I will say that's the aspect of me that helped me get out of depression instantly. It was incredible to realize that I'm a daughter of God, and I'm not alone. In spite of being alone, I'm not alone. And it was an awakening moment in my life a couple of times. And wow, it
Same
was,
for me. Absolutely.
yes. And so, four bodies of self, four seasons. And how does it relate to the four seasons? Think of it this way: the mental, spring. Our mind is awakening out of a deep, deep sleep. Summer is about the physical, right? We get very active. We feel like burning off the winter fat. We're much more apt to go into on hikes and walks and canoeing and swimming. I'm trying. I know we're going to be short of time, so I'm going to have to talk a little bit faster now, but try to get this all in, because I want the imagery to be left with your listeners so that they can start to make their own connections. Fall is all about emotions, and it's no coincidence. This is a time of Thanksgiving, families coming together, giving thanks. Christmas, winter, the spiritual aspect. And so this was always recognized, and I want to go back to the Druids and the Celts, because they were so tuned in to the elements of nature and the four seasons. And they respected that each one of the seasons brought gifts, brought a strength to and live in that particular aspect of body. So they respected spring, the mental, creation, creativity, planning, getting ready to plant their seeds. And I always go back to agriculture because it's such a perfect analogy of how the four seasons can work. So the equinox became known as the seed planting day, literally getting your fields ready and planting the seeds. And when you think of this as ideas, or birthing a book, or birthing a company, or creating a script, a lot of people find that from January to March is one of their best times for planning. And a lot of companies actually do this. Their strategic meetings begin when they all come back from holidays, and the sun, now remember, the sun is now returning. We're getting longer days, so we're feeling more energized. We're getting up earlier in the morning. Come March 1st, 21st, I call it launch day. It's your seed planting day. We want to make sure that our plans are all in place and that we're ready to let the public know, here's my idea. um, and we put it out into the grand universe. And then what we do is we begin to nurture it. So summer, what do we do? What do we do with our gardens? We're watering, we're picking out the weeds, we're pruning, we're making it a little more perfect. We're preparing. And our first harvest then comes June 21st. But there is a second harvest, which comes later in September. But summer now that our ideas, our plants are growing, we can also take the time for celebration. And what do? We go up to our cottages. We're sitting on the decks with our friends. We are being with our family and in nature, and we're expressing that extra energy we have. Don't forget too, our foods are so much better. We're buying from local markets. Everything is more energized, and it's an overabundance of energy, and we have the ability to express that energy, and it's a time of joy and celebration and reward. Come September, what are we doing? We're all kind of packing up again, and we're going back to our home environments, and we're getting ready for the final harvest, which symbolically is September 21st. And by that time, I've told people this is where you should be really reaping the rewards, the benefits, the money, the clients. You're seeing ticket sales. You're seeing whatever it is that you had envisioned, you planted, you nurtured. You absolutely should have that coming back to you by the ninth month of the year. And of course, October, we talk about the harvest, Thanksgiving. So now we have this time for celebration and giving back. And traditionally in the Celtic world, tribes, this was a time of meeting up at the major, village centers or communities. You bring your wares, you bring your wool, you bring your wax, you bring your overabundance of what your family doesn't need. You make your trades there. You trade your wax for wool, whatever it is you need, and you head back. But there was a major celebration that was done with fire. And the story goes that when you leave your home to go to the celebration, to do your trading, you would put the fire out in your home. Your whole family would caravan to the village. You'd stay and celebrate, do your trade for a few days. There was a giant fire that you would have taken the fire from your hearth and you would add it to the village fire. And at the end, every family would reignite a lamp oil or some kind of a wool fire stick. And you make sure that fire stays alive all the way back to your home. And you would light your fireplace with the fire from the village.
I love that.
And it was a symbol of we are always connected. See you next year, but we're always connected. The other aspect of fire, it represented the sun. And so there was great worship, as we know, in all these ancient cultures for the sun. We've lost that a little bit now, but we are, in my world, feeling the importance now of all of us reconnecting with this ancient respect for these great bodies that live in our environment that keep us alive: the sun, the moon, the planets, the water system, which is the blood of the earth. It's the detox system, including our air, the breath that we take in, the trees that are trying so hard to process, for us, for the planet to survive. And everything is under strain right now. But, not to lose my train of thought, this is a really significant time of year for giving thanks in October for what existed around them. And there was such reverence and respect for it that they began to show it in their art. You would see it on the medicine bags of medicine people. You would see it on the back of robes, big suns, moons, and their connection with the sun and the moons. And this was a symbol to the tribe of their status, their awareness, and their reverence for nature. And come winter, this represents the spiritual aspect. And so, a lot of us these days, I'm going to say this, I feel a lot of people have a fear of quiet.
Yes.
And right? And so that was not the case. This was not a time of inactivity. It was a time of silence, which is active.
Mm-hmm.
Time for meditation. It's time for self-reflection. And so as I was living on the side of the forest, so I'm a type A personality, I was finding winter sometimes difficult, but not anymore. And I've been free from that for well over 10, 15 years, where I can't wait for that first snowfall, get the fire going. And for me, it's always been a time for self-reflection and writing. And it's not been a time of inactivity, though the energy around is inactive, but it's actually quite crystal. I call it crystal energy. There is a lot happening under the ground and in the skies. There's still movement. Nature never stops moving. It's just we're moving within. And that resistance in the modern day culture is very predominant, right? People want to be active 365 days a year, or they start to have anxiety. And I read a book once by a guy, and he was a broker in New York. And he said one day he went into work and he was going along a schedule. And then all of a sudden there was like a half-hour block on his schedule where he had nothing planned. And he had a panic attack. Literally a panic attack at his desk. And he realized there's something wrong with me. And he was on Oprah, actually, and he talked about that moment. It was an aha moment for him. What is wrong with me that I can't have 30 minutes of nothing to do and have a panic attack?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I hear this a lot when I talk to people about joy. They're like, they all want free time, like we have right now. And then when they
Right.
get it, they don't even know what small things would make them happy, and they don't enjoy that time, and it's so fascinating to me.
Well, I think it's just people are afraid of the stillness because then they're sitting with their thoughts. And I think we have done some injustice within our own education system. We don't talk about the importance of mind health, and we don't talk about the importance of resolve. And so when we're living in a society where we're not talking about mind health, kids have no idea how their mind works. They're simply trying to process the bombardment of instantaneous, continuous bits and bytes of information that has no conclusion. There is no synthesis. And so the beauty of solar astrology and this process that I'm living now is part of my everyday life, morning till night, which, I don't really have to think about it so much anymore, but I'm feeling is I have finally got synthesis in my life, in my work. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. It is intentional living. It is intentional days that I have created. And that also moves us into an intentional year, and how the year can unfold, and how you can use the seasons and their beauty, their unique and beautiful attributes that they give us to nurture those 4 aspects of ourself and not resist it, but go rather with the flow of the river rather than trying to jump upstream all the time, which was me prior to all
Yes,
of
me
this.
too. And I just wanted to add, when there was a beautiful weekend retreat up at the Grail, I think it was it was late November because it was the American Thanksgiving. And we had this beautiful opportunity. You walked us through this, and we laid out our year. And I'm hoping that you're going to come back in November or December so we can share this again as we embark on another new year. But for people listening right now, so whether they're listening in the spring or the summer, and there's that thing where people are like, well, I missed it, so it's irrelevant. Like, what could somebody listening in this moment, how could they just get started, embrace where they are, not get overwhelmed by a whole year, but just start right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would divide it up into the 4 sections, right? So start, from your December 21st to March 21st would become a segment. The 21st of March to the 21st of June would be the second. The third would be to September 21st, and then the final would be December 21st. So then what I would do is write the spring as your mental guide, your summer is your physical guide, and your autumn is the emotional, and then your your winter would be your December 21st would be your spiritual. Get a calendar and put some notes in the calendar, the notes that we're talking about today, and start to really live with that calendar close by. So you're actually looking at the months. So we're about to flip the calendar to May, and start to journal about what does May feel like to you. This would be a wonderful, wonderful exercise to spend a couple of evenings with yourself. Put your feet up, get a cup of tea after dinner, and just look at the calendar and make notes on the calendar for each month. What does the month feel like? I was saying to you, it's difficult to do this whole workshop in an hour. But in the end, this really is an intuitive process. And as you experience, and the women who are at the manifesting workshop, and thank you for mentioning November, because I am considering doing it again. It's really, in the end, I really want people to connect with their own inner intuition, their inner barometer. You've lived enough years in your life to feel and sense what each one of these seasons and months bring to you. How do you feel about, what's your behavior like in June, July, August? How is that different from September, October, November? And what we have found, because I've presented this in front of, hundreds of people at a time, there is a commonality that everybody walks away going, you know what? I'm kind of already living it. My behaviors do seem to reflect what those months bring, right? So it's already part of our innate biorhythm. And so all we're doing here is identifying it, getting a little more clear about it, making it relatable now to how you can use that energy of each of those months to care for yourself in your body, your mind, your emotional self, your spiritual self. Start honoring those aspects of self, and especially when those particular seasons come forward, recognizing, especially winter, this is a time for spiritual reflection. And when winter's moving, comes to an end, you're going to always start to feel, oh, I can't wait to move, right? I can't wait for the fitness clubs to open. I can't wait to sign up for some courses. There's a mental energy that returns to us come January 1st and 2nd. What are we doing? We're writing resolutions. There's already a natural inner sense that happens to so many of us. But if you're not aware, you may be trying to be that salmon who's jumping, in the wrong direction or upstream instead of going with the flow. When you start to get into the flow of your biorhythm, with the natural biorhythm of nature and realize I am nature, I am in her rhythm, you will get so much more done and accomplished. And the reward, it comes with more ease.
Yes.
Right? Because, Adrian, we're all working with individuals. It's not just about us. We have kids, we have partners, we have teams, we have collective communities. And if you're trying to force something that energetically isn't in alignment and congruent with a particular time of year, you're going to struggle. Like who wants to ask their kids to, clean up their room or paint their room a week before Christmas? When are you going to have a strategic meeting with your team in December? I don't think you're going to have the attendance or the presence of team members. Certain times of year tell you, you know what, if I tune into the electromagnetic energy, because there's some months that are more electric, some are more magnetic, like winter. When you're in that electric, which would be spring, that's the time to engage mental, talent, ideas, strategy meetings. That is absolutely the best time, is in that late winter, early spring. The energy is moving forward and we're picking up on it because the sunshine is the thing that's beginning to energize our body. And so, yes, I know you asked me a question, and I could go on forever. I wish I could give the full picture, but I really hope people can connect with this intuitively. And I do believe most listeners are going to feel some sense of familiarity with
I think they will
already.
too. And I think, especially because we're having this conversation right now, we have had a chance to press pause and slow down and get more connected. And I think we're all agreeing that it's, an opportunity to press reset too. So it's very, very timely.
Yeah. And of course, so the timing, it's unusual what's happening, but I realize too, this is a chance to press reset. So my own personal goals are on hold, but I told you yesterday, it doesn't mean I've stopped dreaming. I'm dreaming more. So I've had to cancel 3 trips. 3 trips.
Yes.
2 of them were overseas. And you know what? I decided I've got 2 trips now, new trips that I'm dreaming. They're going to take place in North America. So I won't be going overseas. And I was very disappointed and heartbroken and kind of grieved over not being able to go, because there were 2 events actually that are canceled. So I started thinking, no, I'm not going to allow myself to get depressed over the fact that I can't travel this year. I have a feeling I am going to be able to travel this year, but I will remain in North America. And when I started to look at all the possibilities, and I've narrowed it down to 2, and I think I will be taking these 2 trips, I'm really excited about it again. And I'm actually changing my whole, I'm not sad about those other trips anymore. I'm very excited about these new ones. And I think that's the way we have to think, right?
I
You
think
have
so, because
to.
I think now is an extreme example of, we put things in place to plan and create. And sometimes, we get redirected, or sometimes something comes quicker or takes longer or looks a little bit different. And it's all okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And, interesting enough, my words, so every year, New Year's Eve, I meditate. I do that. I do a symbolic super manifesting. And maybe we can do a follow up call with you in October when things are settled and things are open,
Absolutely.
and we can prepare. Yeah, we can prepare your listeners to actually take them through the process. I think
I would
I would love
love
to do that.
that. Done.
Okay, we're on. So on New Year's Eve, we do a ceremony. a super manifesting ceremony. It's an invocation. And that night on December 31st, 2019, I finished my invocation of my manifesting goals for 2020. And then I also sit for a while following and ask, is there a message for me? And usually there's a word, one word, sometimes two, that comes down, and I've made that word my mantra reminder of lessons for the year that's coming. So I did not expect these two words that came that night. And the words, I understand it now, the words were divine timing.
I was very curious. I'm like, what is she going to say? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. So 5 years ago, I remember it was go with the flow. I really needed to learn how to go with the flow. And it was the year I needed to learn, go with the flow. This time it was divine timing. And I thought, okay, divine timing. So I'm a bit of a resistant to divine timing. Oh, it was meant to be. I've kind of, because it takes control out of it from me. And so I was really surprised that came, and went, okay, that's really interesting, divine timing. Well, no doubt by January, my life started getting interrupted. Yes. February, interruption. March, my business shuts down. Divine timing. I realize now, wow, this was the message for me for the year. It's not always about your divine timing. And one thing I want to say about what's happening, this is not personal karma for anybody, what's happening here. What you're going through has nothing to do with personal karma. This is a humanity on a full-on, large-scale karma for all of us as a group. We're all paying the price for what we've chosen, how we've chosen to use the resources of this planet. And it's telling us, okay, you can only push so far, and you can only leave that pressure cooker lid on for so long, and it's going to explode. And this, to me, is an example of that. Same with the tsunamis, same with the floods, the fires in Australia. It's pressure cooker. The symbol is pressure cooker, and it just, nature can only handle so much. It can only recover from so much. And eventually it just says, we're going to collapse here, and explodes. And this is one of those examples. I feel the coronavirus is an example of us not living in harmony, and that we've been building and building and building the pressure. And finally, Mother Nature just says, okay, here's the result of not caring for animals. Here's a result of what the cruelty we inflict on our animal population, our tree population, our resources. 75% of our forests are now gone. That's crazy and hard to fathom. And the coral reefs, was it 50% of the coral reef, maybe more, is gone now? It's time for recovery. It's time for global health for people, animals, planet, trees, ocean, for everything. We have to really start to manifest the things we want in life, but not at the cost of anything else. And I remember Pope John Paul, who I loved. I was not raised Catholic, but I loved him, and I love St. Francis too. He said something one day that went like this. They asked him, what is the greatest truth that you ever heard that you applied to your own life? And would you share it with us? And he said, yes, never use anyone or anything as a means to your own ends. And that hit me because I remember my father saying something like that to me when I was a kid. Never really paid attention, but as an adult, it hit me. And that's how I tried to live my life, in that place of accountability. I wasn't perfect, but I became much more aware of how I use or take from the planet and what's the cost of that. So I'm coming down to like making changes in my life that I hadn't really considered fully. And those changes, it's going to mean change in behaviors and purchasing. You know me, I've really tried to talk about this for several years, but making those changes is not easy. But I have to say, like simple things, I used my last piece of saran wrap in October, and I've totally converted to, seal everything with permanent sealing capacities or equipment, accessories for your kitchen and things like that. My kitchen is turning into a green kitchen. I just planted my garden tower yesterday on Earth Day in my living room. I'm going to try and grow my own food now. So there are things that we are going to see happening, I believe, in how we function in our homes and in our offices, that this event has made us more aware to be very mindful of what is the cost of something that you're used to having or buying or using. What is the cost to other people, animals, and the planet? And are you willing to change that?
It's so beautiful. I love how you've just tied this all together, in terms of, our personal direction and what we want to manifest personally, and our personal harmony, our personal recovery, and then all of these things on a global scale. And we're all seeing what an impact we can have, and it's incredible. So I thank you for that. And we will definitely have you back at least one more time, maybe several, because I do think, it's hard to imagine right now where we will be in 6 months, but to go through this process with these 6 months behind us and looking forward to a new year, it's always an important exercise. But I think this year it will be particularly essential. So we're going to put all of your information on the website in the show notes. But how do you like people to reach you?
There is the Grail Springs website, but my personal website, because I do some coaching, and there's a little bit of a page on the 4 seasons of manifesting, and there will be an online course that you can take at your leisure. That's almost finished. So if you want updates, you can check on at MadeleineMarentette.com. But also Grail Springs. I would recommend the Grail Springs website newsletter, because everything I do and offer always ends up in that newsletter. So that's always a good place to stay in touch. And also the Grail Springs Facebook page is always filled with upcoming events.
Amazing.
As well.
Thank you for everything.
You are so welcome. It's a little bit unusual because of what's going on. But I think, the lesson is the same for everyone. It's really a time for reflection on what we can do to manifest, what we can manifest in our own life that will help people, the planet, and animals into the future. And so I think it's a pretty significant year that's going to be talked about for centuries.
I agree. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Take care, everybody. Be well, and hope to see you someday at Grail Springs. Look forward to it.
Thank you for listening. May some of the wisdom shared here inspire your most intentional living. For more information about this episode, this podcast, intentional living, and my work in the world, please visit mayyouknowjoy.com. You can also find my May You Know Joy and Seeds of Intention cards there, and my book, Intentional Days. You'll also find details for the Intentional Days membership, where you can gain access to a thriving community of intentional souls and lots of regular inspiration. I've got you covered. Until next time, I wish you great joy and many intentional days.